So, Katie, I wanted to talk a little bit about a judge that came before Samson. And you'll recall that we talked about Samson a week or so ago. And this judge lived during a time when Israel was overrun by a very powerful enemy known as the Midianites. And they had succeeded in burning the crops, the farms, and the homes of the Israelites. And so they had been reduced, all of Israel for the most part, to living in caves in the sides of mountains. And it's from within this context that they begin to cry out to God for a deliverer from this enemy. And God sends them an unlikely individual to do this because he's no intellectual, physical, or spiritual giant. He doesn't even have a high opinion of himself, and neither do the people around him have a high opinion of him. And you know who I'm talking about. It's Gideon. And my question, at least originally, was why would God use this individual to deliver Israel from such a powerful enemy like the Midianites when seriously, there must have been greater people all over Israel who could have done a superior job. And, after racking my 54-year-old brains, I only have one brain, but it's in two hemispheres, I can only come up with two reasons. And the first is that Gideon, I think, was a very humble man. Because when God chooses him, the first thing out of his mouth, really, is that he is the least in his family, from the least of the clans and from the least of all the tribes. I mean, he doesn't try and build himself up. And while it's kind of laughable, his reply, I think he was very accurate about his limitations. And I think the Lord honored that. And I think Gideon realized that if God was going to deliver Israel, he'd have to do it in spite of Gideon. And then the other reason, I think Gideon was God's friend. And I think God was Gideon's friend. And I don't say that in a light way. I mean, Abraham, who came long before Gideon, was known as God's friend. But when you look at Gideon, the way he relates to God, he talks about his shortcomings. He's vulnerable with the Lord, just like you would be with a true friend. He's not afraid to do that. And then you also have Gideon having the freedom to, and take this with a grain of salt, sound stupid, with the whole fleece thing where he's testing the Lord. Well, Lord, if you're really with me, make the fleece dry and the floor wet. Okay, now, if you're really with me, one more time, make the fleece wet and the floor dry. And it's funny, all of this stuff. But the point remains. I think Gideon had that kind of an intimate relationship with the Lord, where he was secure enough to make these offers, to sound stupid, to make demands, to be vulnerable, and he knew the Lord would still accept him. And I think the feeling was mutual. And in my own life, I can learn from Gideon in that the obstacles that I face on a daily basis are only overcome with God. It's not a Steve thing. And I think also God wants me to have a relationship with him in much the same way that Gideon did. He wants to be my friend. He wants me to know that I can be vulnerable with him, that I have the freedom to sound stupid with him and not be rejected. So just some food for thought, take it or leave it. But that's what Gideon does for me. God bless you.